Joe, what exactly has been going on? The trigger is what? The fear of overheating in the U.S., or is it a market function that there were too many algorithms and it kind of just sparked a sell-off?
No, I think it's the former. I think, we went into the year concerned that the market was somewhat complacent, that we were going to see a cyclical upturn in both inflation and growth. We saw that this past Friday with the wage data in the United States. So that clearly was something that in our mind was, I think what we're seeing today was inevitable given the cyclical risk that we were going to see this year. Right,
but why did you see it and the markets didn't?
Well, I think market was still very skeptical that we were going to see wage pressures in the United States, and so the Phillips curve has been dormant; it's not dead, and so this, in our minds, is consistent with that sort of cyclical run-up in inflation that I think the equity market was somewhat complacent about.
Okay, no, we have to remind ourselves, Max. If you bring it back to like 2012, this correction is not huge when you look at the S&P or the SXP over in Europe. But were you surprised by the violence, the trigger?
Not necessarily. I'm a bit surprised about the timing. I would have expected it in, let's say, 2-3 weeks' time. I would have expected it after the earnings season. So my base case was, look, the earnings season is probably going to be a trigger for further upside in equities. And then at one point, you will see the first inflation releases basically in the US coming out above consensus expectations. And that will scare investors. In our base case, when we wrote our 2018 outlook, was basically saying, look, don't underestimate the risks of slightly steeper curves and very drastically steeper curves in the US. Because when you look at the correlation between inflation surprises and the long end of the curve in the US, that has been quite rock steady in 2017. And that's what's happening right now. So we only had, when you look at CPI, core CPI, PCE, we only had two really slight upward surprise in inflation, and that already was enough to bring, slightly steeper curves, and that was affecting equities as well.